Today on the Huddle, we're talking the most insane contract in sports, the absolute joke that is the NFL MVP odds board, why the AFC East is the most interesting division race in the NFL, and much more. Plus, we were perfect with our 4 NFL Sunday bets last week, and we've got a bunch more for the weekend ahead. It's time to Huddle. Let's go. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle. I am Andrew Avery. With me, as always, is Tony Farmer at Tony's Market Tips on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. Tony, how's it going?
Doing well, man. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Niners off another big win, a wild NFL Week 14. We'll get into all that here coming up. But first, Tony, maybe the most crazy, free agent saga since maybe LeBron James and the decision. Of course, it was a wild Friday. It was a wild Saturday. Shohei Ohtani ultimately picks the Los Angeles Dodgers in what is an astronomical contract, 10 years, $700 million. But Tony, what's come out in the wake of that weekend announcement, of course, in Shohei's way, announces it on Instagram with just a post of the Dodgers logo. But I digress. As a Jays fan, it was a stomach punch. Ohtani goes 10 years, $700 million, but deferred payments. So he's going to be making $2 million over the next decade, and then $680 million for the next 10 years. What do you make of all this?
It's fascinating. I don't know if you follow Darren Rovell on Twitter, but he had a tweet talking about the income tax implications of this in the state of California. And he basically insinuated that the state of California isn't going to let this fly. If you think for a second that they're going to allow themselves just to collect from the $2 million portion of the salary, and then he leaves the state of California, goes back to Japan maybe after he retires, etc. They're going to get their piece. And so I don't know. I'm like, is there going to be a legal battle ahead between Ohtani and the state of California? I don't know enough about income taxes, etc. But fascinating from that perspective. This isn't unprecedented. We've seen deferred salaries before in baseball, but what's unprecedented about this is the amount. I mean, this is a large amount of the largest contract. So I kind of think of it, Andrew, like, are credit cards good or bad? It kind of depends on who's holding the credit card. There's good reasons to use credit cards, and credit cards can get out of control. So when I look at the implications of this on Major League Baseball, if this does sort of become a thing, it's like, well, I think it's going to depend on how responsible these folks negotiating the contracts are.
Yeah, just as a thumbnail, I believe in the state of California, and by no means do I know anything about state income taxes as well, but after a decade of deferred payments, in California, the tax goes to where the person resides after that decade is up. So theoretically speaking, if Shohei moves to Japan, when that $680 million kicks in, California gets zero, which is why Tony's mentioning the fact that the state might have something to ultimately say about it. It's certainly crazy because on the surface it looks like, oh man, Shohei, what a great dude, adjusting his contract so that the Dodgers have more money to spend to go after dudes like Yamamoto, the pitcher from Japan, other potential free agents who might be out there for the next 10 years. But it looks now it's like a tax dodging move, which is crazy to me. But talk to me about this contract. You're right, deferred payments, nothing new. We see it in multiple sports. But is this a sort of death knell for smaller market teams where a team in the second biggest market with the second biggest regional, TV contract, the Dodgers, multi-billion-dollar contract there, if they can do this moving forward and they're not breaking any rules as per current player and league CBA, is this a death knell for small market teams?
I think it could hurt them. I was actually thinking, Andrew, it could hurt them in a different kind of way. Could you see a small market team trying this and saying, we can't afford a big free agent unless we do this, and kind of getting themselves into trouble that way, getting themselves into a situation where they're paying, 1, 2, 3 guys money that they just can't afford 10 years from now because they took a big risk and assumed that they'd get a couple World Series out of it and increase revenue and increase ticket prices, et cetera. So I think it could hurt them in a couple different ways. I think it's also kind of fascinating from almost, if I can nerd out for a second, like an anthropological perspective, like culturally, the Japanese culture is a little less focused on instant gratification And they're also more of a like collectivistic culture, team first. So put the tax stuff aside for a second. It's fascinating that a Japanese player is the one making these decisions. And I think it's kind of refreshing in this, American culture where it's like instant gratification. Give me the money now. If I win the lottery one day, I'd rather have the upfront money, even though I'm going to be like missing out on money long term. Interesting that it's a Japanese player taking this route. And from what I read, it was his idea, allegedly, that he's the one that initiated this with the Dodgers. This was his preference.
And not just the Dodgers. I think any team that was in those sort of last conversations, be it the Jays, the Giants, he had pitched that idea of the deferred payment system. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if, the players and owners do something about this on the baseball side, what the state of California does, if they can have any say on this. Certainly something to watch. Dodgers, I believe, plus 550 in World Series futures. Ridiculous Mookie, Freddie Freeman, Shohei, three-headed monster in the lineup. The potential to go and get Yamamoto and others. Very interesting. On to the NFL, though. Crazy week 14. I want to start with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, though. It was huge earlier in the week. Mahomes sort of lashing out, about the referees to Josh Allen in the post-game sort of handshake there when they met up after the game. But his sulking, and he's come out and apologized to his credit in the wake of all this. But has he now moved into sort of elite crybaby status? And for those that maybe live under a rock, I'm referring to the Tony sort of offside call that nullified a really nice touchdown, to be fair. But Mahomes absolutely livid after the game about how bad of a call it was. But what's your take on this whole Patrick Mahomes thing?
I was embarrassed for him. I mean, to see a grown man cry like that, not just the Josh Allen thing that you mentioned, but how about before the Josh Allen thing where he was like, he literally needed to be held back by his teammates because he was berating the referees with obscenities. He slams his helmet down. And then you mentioned that apology. Let's talk about that apology for a second, because this is a multi-tiered crybaby effort from Mahomes. You get fired up on the sideline, okay? We all lose our temper. Maybe we've had road rage incidences or at our job or at our workplace. It happens. No fault, okay? You're still heated for the handshake. You're still heated and saying things during the press conference. Then the next day, that's 3 times, right? Now, the fourth error, in my opinion, was the next day during that apology. That apology to me was not sincere. It was like there was a PR person with a gun to his head and he was just like reading from a script. Let's take his words, right? He said, "I probably regret acting like that." Does that sound like a sincere apology? And then I love this part. He says, "More than anything, I regret the way that I acted toward Josh." And then later he says something to the effect of how he really regrets the Josh Allen part and he minimizes what happened on the sidelines. So it's kind of like, yeah, like I was justified in that. This is a guy who's entitled. Patrick Mahomes, he's been on all the magazine covers. He's been on the talk shows. He's won 2 Super Bowls now. By the way, 2 Super Bowls which had questionable calls in them. This guy is absolutely acting as if he's entitled and he deserves these calls. Listen to his words. When he says, Travis Kelce's had a Hall of Fame career, how can you take that away from him? What is the definition of entitled? Let me read it to you right from the dictionary. Believing oneself to be inherently deserving of special privileges or special treatment. This is entitlement. Patrick Mahomes is acting like an entitled, spoiled brat. Like a parent who gives their child ice cream every night of the week. And then the first time they say, no, you can't have ice cream. Oh, what the heck? I've been getting all these calls. How about earlier this year when the Chiefs, Ladarius Sneed, took his helmet off and the ref, you could read his lips, said, put your helmet back on. Andrew, in all your years of watching football, have you ever seen that before? That was unprecedented. I've never seen an official tell a player in the NFL to put his helmet back on so that he doesn't get a penalty. So the Chiefs are used to getting these kinds of calls. And when they don't, I don't even want to say when a call doesn't go their way because it was the right call and everybody acknowledges that. But they're so used to getting away with bad calls and riding these to success. When a call doesn't go his way, he pouts and melts down in a 4-tiered effort on the sideline, on the field, in the press conference, and with a really crappy apology the next day. I also love this piece about his apology. I care so much. I love this game so much, and I love my teammates. You can use that to justify, Andrew, you and I go out drinking, and I lose my temper, and I hit you. Sorry, Andrew, I care so much about our friendship. That's why that happened. I know at Thanksgiving, family, I got mad and I yelled some obscenities toward grandma, but it's because I care so much about this family. Get that out of here. He also says in his apology, that he does recognize it's not good for kids watching. Patrick Mahomes, if you want to be a role model for kids, teach them how to apologize and own your mistakes. You lost your temper. It was an ugly moment for you. It looked really bad. Own it. You had a bad day. You had a bad couple days. This half-ass apology is disgusting.
10 minutes into the show, Tony's reading from the dictionary. He's digging into anthropology. Unprecedented territory here. But talking about that, Tony, there's a bit of a conspiracy going around because it looks, when you look at that sideline camera, he's offside, I believe. But there was also the news that came out that he was checking with the sideline official in that game, in that instant, and they gave him the all clear, did they not? Or am I misinterpreting what trickled out after the game?
So what I saw, and I think we saw the same camera angles, it was pretty popular on Twitter. What I saw is I saw him look over, and we can't see, I don't think we saw the referee give him sort of the thumbs up or the head nod or whatever that gesture is. Again, that goes back to entitlement. Kansas City Chiefs, Kadarius Toney, look over, I'm good. I'm entitled. Yeah. I don't respect that official enough to get his reaction. I'm assuming that I'm good because I'm a Kansas City Chief. It's entitlement through and through. But the conspiracy angle is interesting because, come on, you're going to tell me that CBS, was it CBS or Fox? That was a CBS game, right?
CBS, I believe.
Yeah. So you're going to tell me that CBS didn't have that camera angle of them, of him checking and looking over? Why did that come out after the game from someone's iPhone camera? That was kind of weird. And then there was all this stuff about supposedly a couple CBS reporters had to, or I don't know if someone told them to, but they did delete their tweets saying that he indeed checked. So that's a little concerning, that seeming coordinated, that they both deleted their tweets. I would love to know from them why they decided to delete those tweets and if someone asked them to, because it doesn't make the league look good. So yeah, fascinating for sure.
Tough look. It would be interesting. Nothing will come of it. It'll be swept under the rug, but it would be interesting to hear some perspective on that. You're very passionate about this crybaby angle here. So give me your top three crybabies. Give me number three, and then I'll give you my number three, and then you go two, I'll go two, and 1, etc. So give me your third biggest crybaby in sports.
Let's go John McEnroe. Let's go way back, okay? So I didn't watch John McEnroe growing up, before my time. But, I mean, this guy's known for yelling at officials on the court, I'm sure he's had a great tennis career, great numbers, a lot of wins. But when your legacy is tied up in, being known for shouting and yelling, you got to make the crybaby list. So he's number three. I'm going to go with Terrell Owens, number two. He literally cried during press conferences, that's my quarterback. We all remember that. But then also crying about not getting the football. And while his team was winning, not getting the football enough constantly, even though he had a Pro Bowl quarterback in Jeff Garcia, by the way. And so those antics put him on my top three list. And then I'm going to go with George Kirby. This isn't a household name. There's probably some people out there who need to be reminded who George Kirby is. But he's the Major League Baseball pitcher who this past year got lit up in, I believe, the 7th inning. And during his interview afterwards, he completely threw his manager under the bus and said, I shouldn't have been back out there for that 7th inning. I wish I wouldn't have gone back out. One, throwing your manager under the bus. That's why you're number one on this list. But two, bro, there's a dialogue that can take place. If you really think you're about to give up a home run and your arm is that toast, you can say that to your manager. This isn't, it's not quite like the military where I'm just taking orders, I better go out there. There can be a dialogue that takes place. And for him to just take ownership away from his role in that dialogue and to just whine about that, after 90 pitches, by the way, this wasn't 120 or 130 pitches, he's the biggest crybaby for me.
You mentioned Jeff Garcia back in the day. You ever see Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah, one of my favorite movies, man. That's top 10 on my movie list.
Me and my buddies always used to joke that Garcia looked a little bit too much like Boggs from Shawshank Redemption.
I could see it. I absolutely can see that resemblance, for sure. For sure.
Here's my top 3, Tony. I'm going number 3, Dick Vermeil. A bit of a tongue-in-cheek one here because Dick Vermeil just flat out loved to cry. Sort of post-game, any press conference, dude was just a crier. But you know what? I respect it. Number 2, I'm going to go Sidney Crosby, and it's well documented how Sid the Kid has come, how far he's come in terms of his sulking and complaining to the refs. This guy was known as Cindy Crosby back in the day. But in the early days of his career, this dude was constantly moaning. Penguins as a team, some of the worst. Plus, Sid was flopping worse than a Brazilian soccer player. So I got Sid at number 2. Number 1, I mean, you could take any sort of NBA player here, but I'll go with LeBron James at number 1. I mean, this dude cries to the refs, yells at the refs, basically has carte blanche to do what he wants to poor NBA officials, lies about books he's reading, lies about The Godfather. That whole thing last year going around about the LeBron Lies compilation, one of the best things the internet has ever done. Easily number 1 crybaby in sports history.
Those are good lists, man. Those are good lists. I'm proud of these top 3s that we put together here.
It's not bad. It's not bad. But speaking of Patrick Mahomes, we got to talk about Tommy Cutlets here. So this year, Tony, between DeVito and Mahomes, same winning percentage, passer rating basically the same, yards per completion, TD passes to picks basically the same. What do you make of this guy? I mean, a few weeks ago, we joked about him when he was going to be starting because he didn't really have that sort of resume based on his college career. What do you make of Tommy DeVito and the Giants here?
Well, first of all, Andrew, I love how if we didn't anger the Kansas City Chiefs fans enough at the top of the show, we're going to put Patrick Mahomes and DeVito in the same sentence.
Same conversation, buddy. Yep.
I love it. On a serious note, I'm sorry. I still have to put this guy as one of the worst 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the league, maybe bottom 5. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on with DeVito right now. And I think what the Giants are doing is a bit of a mirage. I mean, look who they've played in these games. It's not really an impressive run. You beat Washington, you beat New England. Would you agree that those are 2 of the worst 5 teams in the NFL right now, Washington and New England?
New England, yes. Yeah, you know what? Screw it. I was a Sam Howell / Washington believer earlier on, but yeah, I hopped off that. So yeah, sure, I'll buy into that.
So you beat 2 of the 5 worst teams in the NFL, and then you beat Green Bay, which was a nice win, but you were at home and you had a rest advantage off the bye. So I'm not too impressed with what the Giants have done lately. It's better. It's a lot better than what they were doing at the beginning of the year. But I don't think DeVito's the next Brock Purdy or anything like that. We gotta chill out on the Giants hype a little bit, I think.
At the Saints this week, 6-point dogs. Did you see DeVito's agent? Of course you did. I mean, this dude was everywhere, straight out of The Sopranos. Like, what's going on with this guy?
He was a character. I want to see more of that guy. Don't we all? I want to see more of. I want to see a sitcom or a documentary or something with this guy as the focus. I want to have a beer with him too.
So then that leads me to my next question, Tony. You were very adamant early on in the season in your disgust at all of the Taylor Swift coverage that the NFL was putting right in front of our faces. So do you feel the same? I know the answer, but do you feel the same way about the DeVito family? Are these people getting more coverage than Taylor Swift?
That's a great question. It's not quite at the level of Swift. They're not showing him quite as often. And these are like everyday people, and I've got no problem with them, getting their time in the spotlight. It's a cool story. This guy kind of came out of nowhere, still lives at home. We've all heard those headlines. And so for some reason, and I guess I'd have to psychoanalyze myself and go back and look at my own biases, et cetera. But for some reason, that doesn't bother me and turn my stomach as much as when we see, Taylor Swift, who already has the spotlight on her outside of sports, period, coming into the sports realm and grabbing the spotlight. So for me, that's the difference. I don't have a problem with the DeVito family or agent getting all this attention right now.
I want to talk about another sort of team that's just sort of hanging around, the Chicago Bears. But first, I want to roll a clip from a few weeks ago where you were just sort of advising to keep an eye on the Chicago Bears. Let's roll that clip.
The Bears' defense is not bad. Like, against the pass, it's not great. But they have a very good defense against the run. And when they have certain matchups, against teams that don't have a prolific passing attack, they can look more than adequate. And I think we saw that last night. Montez Sweat on that defensive line is making a huge difference. I believe the Bears had 10 sacks total coming into that game, and we saw them wreak havoc at times last night. So keep an eye on that Bears defense moving forward.
So, Tony, I believe at that point the Bears were 3-7. Now here they are. They're 2-1 straight up, 3-0 ATS. Since then, they're sort of in the playoff hunt. But what was it that you were sort of seeing with this team? Because early on in the NFL season, this team was not good. On the offensive side of the ball especially, good performances were few and far between. But here we are, sort of Bears hanging around in the sort of, periphery of the playoffs. But you earmarked something with them.
Yeah, it was really on the defensive side of the ball. They got Sweat in that trade, and their biggest issue on defense was their lack of pass rush. So it fit such a great need for them. Now, the trade was questionable in the fact that, this guy's contract's up at the end of the year. But in terms of this year, great move for them. And then the defense, which was ugly earlier in the year, they were hurt. They had guys that nobody had heard of. They had cluster injuries in their secondary. And so I was seeing this team come back together and get healthy with Sweat added, knowing that we're going to have Justin Fields coming back at some point, and they've done really well. Here's some Chicago Bears propaganda for you. The last 3 of their last 4 games, they've held their opponents to 13 points or less. Fields hasn't thrown an interception in the last 3 games. Fields has more carries in each of his last 3 games than any other game this season or any game during his rookie season. So they're allowing this guy to run a little bit more. The whole, let Russ cook thing, it's almost like a let Justin cook thing. They're letting this guy run the ball a little bit more, so that changes the offense a little bit. And DJ Moore, last 3 games, 298 yards from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns last 3 games. So on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, this team is playing well, and it's not fluky wins like the Giants. It's convincing wins, and I'm still convinced that the Bears are a team that you don't want to play toward the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had them on the show picks last week. They win that game straight up as dogs. I like Justin Fields. Sort of been an apologist. Remember that game last year? I believe it was week 1 when the Bears beat the Niners in the rain.
Yeah,
I
remember.
Always something there with this dude. I like that they've gotten it together. DJ Moore, like you pointed out, he's had some big games. So, yeah, very interesting with the Bears. But if you had to pick one, in Super Bowl futures markets, Bears or Giants, who would you go with?
For me, this is pretty easy. I'll go with the Bears because of their remaining schedule. So the Bears have the Browns this week, then the Cardinals, Falcons, and Packers. The Giants have Saints, Eagles twice, and the Rams. So the Giants are going up against, I don't know if you want to call the Saints a playoff team, but 4 potential playoff teams, and the Bears have it pretty easy. This Bears-Browns matchup, I think, is going to be really interesting this week. Andrew, when the March Madness bracket comes out and there's like 2 mid-major teams that you really like, and you're like, come on, they're playing each other in the first round? That's kind of how I feel about the Browns and Bears this week, because I'm bullish on the Bears and I like the Browns at home. I think they're a team to fade on the road, but I like them a lot at home. And I'm like, man, these 2 teams that I think are underrated in these spots are both playing each other. So it should be a fun game to watch.
What will the Browns do at quarterback? Do you know? Has anything sort of surfaced on that front? Are they sticking with Flacco?
I think Flacco is going to be the guy. I mean, he's not playing incredibly well, but he's an upgrade, man. I said on the show last week, he's an upgrade over what they've had at the quarterback position. If Watson was healthy, I guess it becomes a little more debatable, but I think Flacco's the guy going forward.
Yeah, he's getting the job done for sure, and putting up some nice little box scores as well, it has to be said. We got to talk, we got picks coming up here soon, but I want to talk NFL MVP markets, because it's a bit upsetting to me, to be honest. Like most shops have like Dak and Brock Purdy around the top, like those dudes, sort of in that plus 150 to sort of, plus 200 range. But Tony, why do I have to scroll down to find Christian McCaffrey? Like McCaffrey is now going from anywhere from like plus 2,500 to like 50 to 1. Like what's going on here? What am I missing?
It sounds like you want to place a bet there. I mean, we all know quarterbacks typically win these awards. What I find curious is that Tyreek Hill, who's also not a quarterback, people seem to be more open to letting him win the NFL MVP than Christian McCaffrey. So I'm not sure what's going on here. I agree with you. I think those odds should be better. I think it's worth a flyer bet. Just we don't know how these last few weeks of the season are going to pan out. I think he should be a little closer to Purdy. I mean, at least get McCaffrey like 15, 20 to 1. I think that seems like a more reasonable price. But would any of us be surprised if McCaffrey like doesn't even make the top 3 in votes because he's not a quarterback? Wouldn't be shocked to see that. But I think he's not getting enough respect in this market for sure.
So if the season ended today, who's your NFL MVP?
So I'm biased here. I've got a Purdy ticket at 18 to 1, really nice number. I would go with Purdy though. The Dak, man, have you seen Brock Purdy's numbers compared to Dak Prescott's numbers side by side? Like, how do you make an argument that Dak Prescott has had a better season? And there's the whole like argument against Purdy where like, oh, he's in Shanahan's system and he's got a lot of weapons. Dak's got some pretty sweet weapons in Dallas too. Not quite as nice as the cabinet that Brock has, but I just don't see an argument for Dak. And I'm like, is this a liability issue? Like, is that why the Dak Prescott number is so low right now? Because the books have taken a lot of bets on Prescott and don't want to make the number sweeter at this point? Because otherwise, I can't think of another explanation why you're going to put... Even if the Cowboys overtake the Eagles in the NFC East, I still don't think that's enough for him to win it over Purdy.
Do you buy into the knock on Purdy that all he does is throw out to the flats or throw screens, and then his yardage is built on Debo or Ayuk or whomever sort of breaking tackles and accumulating yak?
It's bogus. I mean, he does have, all right, there's a kernel of truth there. He does have some of the best yak guys in the entire NFL on that roster. So sure, he's benefiting from that, but it's not like the guy's got a noodle arm. I mean, we're seeing him make tough throws on the run, deep throws. And when you look at the analytics in terms of like yards per pass, yards, like air yards per attempt and things like that, it's not as if he's throwing these little, screen passes and then McCaffrey's, running for 70 yards and it's inflating his stats. He's throwing some bombs and he's putting some fear into secondaries that he can throw the ball deep. So this whole thing about him being a yak merchant is just maybe you could have said that about him early in the career, but I think he's proven all that wrong.
I gotta say, I love the term yak merchant. Let's keep that. Let's keep that in the discourse here on the show. Before we get into the picks, let's stick with these futures markets. NFL Coach of the Year depends on the book, of course, but I'm seeing Dan Campbell plus 350, D'Amico plus 350, McDaniel plus 550. Shanny plus 1,000, Stefanski 11 to 1. What's your take on that market?
I think this market has shifted considerably. I mean, the numbers haven't necessarily moved to adjust yet, but just in terms of likelihood of winning, Dan Campbell, Mike McDaniel, Mike Tomlin, I think those three guys have disqualified themselves from this market, like just based off of their past performances these last couple of weeks, what they've done. Tomlin was someone I liked as a long shot earlier this year when the Steelers kept winning games, but come on, Steelers, what are you doing the last couple of weeks? So you still see a number low on Campbell, and I know that is definitely because of liability. I mean, Dan Campbell was the most popular Coach of the Year pick before the season started, and I'm sure after they beat the Chiefs week 1, a lot of people doubled down on that and really started to like that. So it's not realistic that he's going to win at this point, but the casinos have to keep that number low and inflated. I'd say at this point, can I get you interested in Sean Payton at plus 950?
Yeah.
Especially if the Broncos keep winning. I think they've won 6 of their last 7. They're 6-1 over the last 7 games. Yeah. So that's an interesting one, especially with the whole turnaround angle where you started off 1-4 or whatever it was and have put together a playoff season potentially. Shanahan at 10-1, certainly like that, especially if they can get the number 1 seed. I think that becomes even more realistic. But how about DeMeco Ryans, a guy that we've talked about a couple times on this show? I've seen around the 3-1 angle or the 3-1 spot. That's certainly worth consideration, but he's got his work cut out for him right now with a roster that's very injured at the moment. But if you believe he can win despite those wins, DeMeco Ryans, you could make an argument that he's the favorite at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him all season, basically, him and the Texans, but the job that he's done there for a team with zero expectation, rookie QB, this, that, and the other thing. I love the Sean Payton show. We talked about the playoffs a few weeks ago. I sort of earmarked the Broncos as a team to look for to make the playoffs, and they've sort of built on that. Again, another big win on the weekend. So yeah, I mean, especially when you let the Dolphins hang a 70 spot on you early in the season, then to turn it around, love that narrative for him. So yeah, definitely a good shout there. Let's get into the picks here, Tony, and I'll start us off this week because I got to play from bowl season. And as a note, we'll have our boy Ryan Hogue on next week to talk bowl season and more. So stay tuned for the Huddle for that next week. But I'm looking at the LA Bowl. That's UCLA against Boise State. I'm going to go under 48.5 here in this one. UCLA, great under bet this season, 10-2 to the under for the Bruins. 18th in the country in scoring defense at just 19.1 points per game. 91st in the nation in points per game on offense, a measly 22.7. That's how you go 10-2 for under bettors. Call them the Iowa of the Pac-12. So Bruins quarterback Dante Moore gone. Boise State QB Taylon Green gone. UCLA also without some players on defense as well. Ramsey and others. Some movement on the coaching staff as well with D coordinator Danton Lynn going to USC. And I just wonder about UCLA's mindset here. Bit of a letdown to be playing on day one of bowl season. It is in LA, but it's not at the Rose Bowl. Plus, with Boise State going with a freshman QB, I just sort of see this one being a defensive, run the ball, keep the clock going kind of game. And I just think the total's a bit too high, so give me the under here.
I like it. I've got a Broncos +5 against the Lions. I wouldn't mind a little sprinkle on the money line here for the Broncos as well. They're 6-1 over their last 7 games. They're healthy. This is one of the healthiest teams in the NFL right now. And Detroit's defense is really suspect. I mean, they've got holes in that defense, and I'm just confident that Sean Payton will be able to exploit those holes in that defense.
I'm going to go Vikes at Bengals. Going to go with the home team here, Bengals -3.5. First off, let's just talk about Jake Browning. Absolutely sensational against the Jags. Really good again against the Colts. So I like the way that he's been cooking here. And the Vikings, not great against the pass. Second highest completion percentage against in the league. So don't be surprised to see Browning cook again on Saturday. And Bengals sort of pushing for the playoffs. Nobody gave the Bengals a shot when Burrow went down with his injury, but this team is 7-6, ahead of the Bills in the wild card hunt. Still a lot of work to do, but with the way this league has gone in 2023, don't rule it out. Home win against the Vikes will be huge. And speaking of the Vikes, this team has lost 2 of 3. And their only win was a 3-zip snooze fest at the Raiders. They won't get the opportunity to hang around at Cincy, so give me the Bengals here as 3.5-point home faves.
I like it. My next one, I like the Falcons -3 against the Panthers. I was really surprised to see that this line was 3. When I do my handicapping, I come up with my own number before the lines are released, and I had this at 4.5. I thought the Falcons were going to be a much bigger favorite, so I like the value here I'm getting on the Falcons -3. The Panthers are just lifeless right now. You'd like to see more fight from a team like this. And it's interesting with the Panthers because their roster isn't bad. They've got some marquee players at marquee positions, but it's just lackluster. They're flat. And the Falcons are going to have a motivation edge here. They're very much in the thick of it, that 3-way race for the division. And so I like them having the motivation edge here over the Panthers. They should be able to win by more than 3.
Bucks at Packers. Again, give me the home team here, -3.5 for the Pack. Big bounce back spot here. Tough one on Monday night. We talked about it against Tommy Cutlets and the Giants, but a real opportunity for that bounce back against the Bucks. Jordan Love played all right, not great in that game, but he's certainly improved leaps and bounds as the season has progressed. 3rd worst against the pass this Bucks D. So at home, look for Love to have a good game. Some injury concerns on the Bucks defense. Vita Vea, Devin White, and a few others on that side of the ball listed as questionable, so we'll have to see how the week pans out on that front. And sure, they are coming off back-to-back wins, but giving up 18 to the lowly Panthers, 25 to the Falcons, rough look there. They've lost 6 of 7 and have to visit Lambeau in December, so give me the bounce back here for the Pack and Jordan Love in Green Bay.
Very good. My last one, I've got the Bills money line here against Dallas. The point spread is short, 2 points, 2.5. Feel a little more comfortable with the money line. I think this is a letdown spot for Dallas. They had that huge win against Philly, which was very emotional. Philly beat them earlier in this year. There was a lot of talk about Dallas can't beat a good team. And I think they could come into this game flat against a buzzsaw team like the Bills, who are not the Buffalo Bills that we saw earlier this season. They are motivated. They know they need to win out or come real close to winning out in order to get to the playoffs. And they're confident as heck coming off these couple great performances the last few weeks. I think some people would say it's destiny for the Bills to win this game and to squeeze their way into the playoffs. Doesn't the NFL want to see Josh Allen in the playoffs? Don't we all want to see the Bills in the playoffs? I think it makes the playoffs a little more exciting when we have a team like that has a lot of firepower in the playoffs.
Well, let me ask you then. There's like intrigue in that AFC East. The Dolphins sort of, got a big lead in the division. They were sort of, the sexy team for multiple weeks throughout this season. The Bills sort of plateaued and didn't look great. But as we sit here today, Wednesday morning, Dolphins minus 400 to win the division. Bills plus 300 to win the division. They've got the favorable schedule here to close the season. Any thoughts on the Bills maybe winning the AFC East?
I think at 3-1, it's worth consideration. I really do. You got to remember the Dolphins last year, they came out of the stretch really hot and they sputtered toward the end of the season and they barely made the playoffs. So I don't know. It's probably too early to say like this is a Mike McDaniel problem and this is a pattern, but after that loss against the Titans, which I want to be careful not to overreact to that loss because that was a crazy situation. But could it have lingering effects? That's a tough way to lose a game at home to a team in the Titans that is frankly not very good. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see them falter down the stretch. You bring up a really good point about the schedules. It's not just like, the Dolphins have a little tougher schedule than the Dolphins have a schedule difference in the Bills. It's glaring. I think that the Dolphins could struggle down the stretch here for sure.
So the Dolphins go Jets, Cowboys, at the Ravens, and then they conclude at home at least versus the Bills. And the Bills... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And the Bills go Cowboys, of course, then at the Chargers, and Herbert's done for the year, versus the Pats, and then, of course, at Miami to finish.
Yeah, and I was just going to throw in there, you gave the 4 games for the Dolphins, and some people might be saying, all right, well, the Jets one's easy at least. I don't know. Is that going to be an easy game? I know there's a 9-point spread, but we've got weather considerations there. The Dolphins' offensive line is banged up. We don't know how healthy Tyreek Hill is. And this is a Jets team, don't forget, they're motivated because they know Aaron Rodgers will be back if they have a chance at the playoffs. So I don't think that game's a gimme anymore. I think the Dolphins could be in trouble.
It's not a gimme. Division game, of course, as well. Yep. Yeah, I don't know, man. I've been a Miami sort of, fan on the edges there, on the fringes throughout the season, but it's getting like really weird here, man. Like, what is it about the Dolphins that they haven't beaten a team above 500? So what is it? Like, what's going on there with that team? Is there something you can put your finger on?
Well, with this last week in particular, the offensive line was banged up. I mean, good luck trying to get first downs when I believe they had 1 or 2 starting healthy offensive linemen. So I think that's a big piece of it. It's injuries this time of year, which, by the way, is why I like the Broncos so much with my other pick. I like to take the teams that are healthy this time of year. I like teams that have bye weeks later in the season because not only are they a little more fresh physically, but mentally they've just sort of had that break. And I think the Dolphins are a team right now that is banged up. And if there were 2 bye weeks in the NFL season, or if they could get one going into the playoffs, like if the Dolphins could still somehow secure that number 1 seed and have a bye week and get fresh, they would be a really scary team in the playoffs.
Little NBA note before we sign off here. Detroit Pistons, there's a few excessive losing streaks in the NBA currently, but the Pistons lost 20 straight games. 4-15-1 against the spread in those 20. They are 12-point home dogs tonight against the Sixers. And Tony, last thing before we sign off here, a lot of talk now about Belichick being done in New England. Been going on for weeks here. Obviously, the Pats, terrible season. What do the Pats do in that head coaching role, do you think? Give us your prediction.
Man, it's so tough to imagine Bill Belichick not on that New England sideline.
Weird, super weird.
Yeah, but I do think there's something to this chatter. You know, if you told me I had to bet right now, I would say Belichick's not back with the Patriots next year. That's where I would put my money, but I don't have enough conviction in it. It's just sort of a gut intuition tells me that there's something to all these rumors that we're hearing.
Any candidates in your mind?
How about Washington? How about, Ron Rivera? I wouldn't be shocked to see him. I think he should be done in Washington. And then you see Bill Belichick come in there. If he gets a new role, is he also going to get the GM role? I think Bill Belichick's been a great coach. I don't know that he's not been a great GM. Like in terms of drafting, at least, especially, he's made some really questionable NFL draft pick moves. So I don't know. Does Bill want to be a GM anymore? Maybe he's burned out. Like I don't know his motivation there and what he wants, and if that's a selling point for him or not. But I could see him doing well in a place like Washington that does have kind of some nice pieces in place.
And what about the vacancy in Foxborough? Who can you see sliding in to sort of steer the ship, as it were, in that organization in New England?
Oh, wow. It's hard to imagine someone else working with Bob Kraft on that sideline. Wow. Oh, man. You'd have to give me some time to think about that one because there's so many. There's like 9 or 10 head coaches that could get fired. So there's so many potential options. But whoever it is, it's kind of like after a breakup, right? Like when you're dating someone that annoys you in this way, they always you want to find someone that you're dating that sort of does the opposite. So it'd be interesting. I'd have to go with like a player's coach, like I don't think Mike Tomlin's going anywhere by any means, but someone like that the players adore, love playing for, just to kind of bring in the polar opposite of what probably rubbed players the wrong way about Bill Belichick.
So me and Steve kicked around this name yesterday. Tell me your thoughts on this. Mike Vrabel.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one, especially with the pedigree, having played with New England. Kraft loves him. I think Mike Vrabel is a top 10, maybe top 5 coach in the NFL. I think that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Top 5, top 10 coach.
Yeah. Absolutely. Vrabel, he's
Okay.
Genius in terms of like game management, in terms of like when to use timeouts and that sort of thing. Vrabel is top notch. I like him a lot.
That's all we got for you today. We went 4-0 with our NFL Sunday picks. I believe we went 1.5, and pushed a half because I had the Asian handicap in the Tottenham bet last week. So another good week. So there's your bets for the weekend. Thank you for watching on YouTube or listening on podcast. Follow Tony on Twitter at Tony's Market Tips. And we'll have Ryan Hogue, our favorite guest, on next week on the Huddle. So we'll see you then to talk more NFL and college bowl season. Thanks for watching.